What's up, guys? I'm going to be giving you some key terms you need to know for taking photos. So let's begin with ISO. What is ISO? ISO is pretty much how sensitive your camera is to light. So let's say you capture a photo with low ISO, and it goes as up to, for example, with my camera D3 500, it's a DSLR camera, digital. The lowest ISO I have is 100, and the highest I have is 25,600. So you're probably like, okay, what do these numbers mean? What is going on? So the low number is how it's less sensitive. Your camera's less sensitive to light. The higher number is it's really, really, really going to be sensitive to light. So let's say with this lighting right now I have on me, you want it at like a medium ISO because the room behind me is actually kind of dim. It's dark. You could try a higher ISO, but it really depends on what you want. Another great thing is focal length. So focal length is pretty much what lens you're using. So for example, actually this is my portrait lens for my Nikon. It is a 35 millimeter with a 1.8 ratio. So meaning this lens is actually really, really good at focusing on one object, and then behind it everything blurs out. So people ask what lens they're using, what's your focal length. It's the millimeters of your lens pretty much. It really determines on when you zoom in on images, when you zoom out, how much you're covering in your image. Another big one, RAW versus JPEG. What's the difference? So RAW actually contains a lot of more information rather than a JPEG file. It's pretty much just a file format. I'm sure we've all like written on Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and you save it as a JPEG file or a Word document. So it's kind of the same thing. So when you capture a photo, you actually have to go on your settings on your camera, depending what you have, and just check on what it's on. So if it's on JPEG, you're actually limiting your photos to look what it's actually supposed to look like. And what I mean by that is JPEG actually adds more color and it kind of changes your image. Rather with RAW, I like to think of it as like raw meat. It's not touched, it hasn't been seasoned, it's totally unfiltered. So that is pretty much what RAW means. Another big one is exposure. Now, exposure kind of relates back to aperture, your ISO, your shutter speed. It's kind of like all those three determining what exposure means. So again, we all know the word exposed. It's pretty much just showing, expressing a limited amount of something, right? Something underexposed, it's like less shown. Something overly exposed, it's shown a lot, right? So the same thing with your cameras. The settings on your exposure, it really goes back to where your aperture's at, your shutter speed, and your ISO. It's just how light and how dark an image is. Again, when you are taking photos with RAW, you don't really have to necessarily have such a great exposure setting on your camera. A great tip I learned is, as long as you are shooting in RAW, pretty much with any editing platform, you're able to just change the exposure however you like it. Also, I'm not too sure if I've covered this, but shutter speed is another one. You hear that? That's how fast my camera's taking a photo. It's not that fast. So I have a lot of different modes on this camera. Some modes are limited to editing the settings on here. Some are just the way it should be. So let's say you're wanting to do portrait mode and your camera has portrait mode, then it actually helps you out with the settings. You don't even have to touch anything because it already knows what you're trying to do. You're trying to focus on somebody's face. So some cameras are fancy and they like detect someone's face and it blurs all the everything behind them, which is super beneficial. Or if you're shooting an auto, which is very, very common, especially for beginners, auto is pretty much free hands. You're able to edit everything here. So, the image quality, the image size. So that's another thing. Aspect ratios. You could also adjust on your camera depending on what you have. White balance. White balance is another key thing. White balance, I had no idea what that was when I first started. I was like, what? Like, why do I have to adjust the whiteness in my camera? That makes no sense. So white balance is actually, you have to go into your settings and actually adjust to what your camera is taking in. So let's say you adjust the white balance to a white wall, right? You're just like, real quick, I'm just gonna do my white balance as a white wall. So you take a photo of a white wall and it has like shadows and it's like dim in your room or whatever. That's the white for your camera. You're teaching your camera that's what white looks like. So let's say I take a photo of somebody in a white museum, like a white wall museum, and it's super bright. I change the ISO, I change everything else, but my camera's white balance is off because a while ago when I adjusted the settings on my white balance of my white wall in my dim room, it's gonna come out dim white, like a sandy white, not like a super white, how white's supposed to look. So sometimes cameras already have it like adjusted for you, but to be honest, it's really, really good you do it yourself because you're teaching your camera what white looks like and how white should be captured within the lens. Again, I'm so sorry if it came out a little confusing. It is kind of confusing, but pretty much that's it. That's all white balance is. This is a long video. So yeah, exposure, okay? So, oh my gosh, you can't even see it. But the lower exposure, the darker your image is going to be. The higher exposure, more light is going to come in. And then also, too, cameras have an area mode. So there's area focus, like autofocus, which is just normal. Every camera comes default like that. Let's say you want to do a landscape, you could always change it to a wide area focus. Face priority, which is AF. It's, yeah, your camera knows what a face looks like. It just captures a face. Subject tracking, this is what my camera has. If you're trying to take a photo of like a fish coming out of water, it like literally will track the fish. Again, every camera is different, but every camera has the same exact settings. So you really just have to work your way around your camera, figure out what you want. Again, because everyone's photography style is super different, you know. Maybe you just like BMW, black and white. Maybe you like colorful photos like me. I personally love colorful photos. Maybe you like grainy photos, you know, you make it look like an old Polaroid type. Again, I will be going over more tips and tricks I've learned over the years of being in college, of learning just photography on its own. And yeah, so I really hope I have helped 1, 2, or even more of you. And if I have, thank you for watching this whole video.